Daniel had been working all day on the outer edge of the human outpost, repairing broken signal panels and fixing old power lines that always acted up when the cold wind blew in from the cliffs. He was tired, and he looked forward to nothing more than a warm meal and a little peace inside his small cabin. The outpost was quiet as usual, with the soft hum of machines in the distance and the faint glow of lights from scattered buildings. Most people had already returned to their quarters, and the sky was turning darker by the minute, covered with soft blue clouds that slowly hid the evening sun. Daniel placed his tools on the shelf as he removed his gloves, feeling the stiffness in his fingers. The day had been long, but he did not complain. He had grown used to this routine. Life on the outer colonies meant hard work, little company, and nights spent with only silence as a companion. He started heating food on the small cooking unit in the corner of his cabin, the warm smell slowly filling the room. The simple scent of cooked vegetables made him relax. He walked toward the window and looked outside at the open land stretching far beyond the outpost walls. In the distance, he could see faint lights from the alien valley, where the peaceful neighboring species lived. The humans and aliens traded goods occasionally, and though they respected each other, they did not interact deeply. Everyone simply stayed with their own people. That was how it had been for years, and Daniel never questioned it. As he sat down to eat, a soft sound reached his ears. At first, he thought it was the wind brushing against the outer walls. But then it came again, a quiet and shaky knock. It wasn't loud. It wasn't firm. It was the kind of knock someone made when they were afraid. Daniel's eyebrows pulled together in confusion. No one visited him, especially not this late. He stood up and walked to the door, his steps slow, wondering who it could possibly be. When he opened the door, he froze for a moment. Standing in front of him was a small alien girl, barely reaching his waist. She had pale violet skin, large bright eyes that shimmered as if holding tears, and thin, delicate markings that glowed faintly along her temples. She looked young, perhaps the alien equivalent of a human child. She trembled as she held a small communication tablet that flickered weakly with broken light. Her hands shook, and she pressed them close to her chest, as if she feared the device might fall apart completely. Daniel gently lowered his voice so he wouldn't frighten her. "Hello? Are you all right?" The girl swallowed, her breath unsteady, and her eyes lifted to him as if gathering courage to speak. Her voice came out soft, nearly a whisper, but filled with fear and sorrow. "Sir, my mother didn't come home." Her words hung in the air between them. The trembling in her voice made Daniel feel something shift inside his chest. He looked at her again, really looked at her, noticing how scared she was. She must have walked alone from the valley all the way to the human outpost. That wasn't easy for someone her age. Her markings glowed brighter for a moment, something that happened when her species felt intense emotion. Daniel realized then that she had not come here for something small. She was desperate. He stepped aside and said gently, "Come inside. It's cold out here." The girl hesitated for a second, then slowly stepped into the cabin. Daniel closed the door softly so she wouldn't be startled. He motioned for her to sit on the small bench near the table. She sat down carefully, holding the broken tablet tightly as if it was the last connection she had to her mother. Daniel sat across from her, keeping his voice calm and steady. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lyra," she whispered, her eyes glancing down. "That's a beautiful name," he said kindly. "I'm Daniel. Can you tell me what happened?" Lyra took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. She explained that her mother, Serena, always returned home before nightfall. It was their routine. Serena worked near the human trading path, gathering plants and minerals her people used for medicine. She always arrived before the sky turned dark. But today, she didn't come. Lyra waited and waited, but her mother never walked through the door of their home. When the stars began to appear, Lyra became frightened. She tried using her communication tablet to reach her mother, but the device malfunctioned, showing only broken signals. That was when she made the decision to come to the human outpost to ask for help. Daniel listened closely, his expression turning serious. He could hear the fear in her voice and see the confusion in her eyes. She wasn't used to being alone at night. Her species valued family deeply, and the thought of separation, even for a short while, caused them great distress. Lyra's small hands tightened around the tablet until her knuckles turned a brighter shade. Daniel realized then that he couldn't simply send her back to her valley or tell her to wait for someone else to help. She needed comfort, reassurance, and action. She needed someone to take responsibility, someone she could trust. And right now, she had chosen him. He spoke softly, leaning forward slightly. "Lyra, do you know where your mother was working today?" She nodded slowly. "Near the gathering path, close to the tall rocks." Daniel recognized the place. It was a narrow area between the outpost and the alien valley. The terrain was uneven but usually safe. Still, an accident could happen, especially if equipment failed or if the light faded too quickly. "Did anyone else see her today?" Daniel asked gently. I don't know," Lyra whispered, her voice shaking again. "She always tells me to stay home until she returns. She says the night is too cold for someone small like me." Daniel felt a knot form in his chest. The worry in her eyes wasn't only fear, it was loneliness, the kind that came when the person you trusted most didn't come back. He knew that feeling all too well. Years ago, he had lost someone who meant the world to him, and that memory always stayed buried quietly in the back of his mind. Seeing Lyra now reminded him of that difficult time, and he could not bring himself to let her face such fear alone. He stood up slowly and took his jacket from the wall. Lyra looked up at him, confused. Daniel put the jacket on and grabbed a small flashlight and a pouch of tools. Lyra's eyes widened slightly, unsure of what he was doing. "Come on," Daniel said softly. "We're going to look for your mother." Lyra blinked as if she did not believe his words. You'll help me?" "Of course," Daniel replied with warmth in his voice. "You should never have to look for someone you love alone." She stood up hesitantly, still unsure if she was dreaming or if a human she barely knew had truly decided to help her personally. When Daniel opened the door and held out his hand to guide her outside, Lyra's small fingers slowly reached for his. The moment their hands touched, something changed. Her trembling eased slightly. She felt safer. The cold air brushed against them as they stepped out into the night. Daniel closed the door behind them and looked down at Lyra. "Stay close. I'll make sure you're safe." Lyra nodded softly, clutching the broken tablet against her chest as they walked toward the dim path leading toward the valley. The sky was now filled with soft stars and distant moonlight. The outpost faded behind them as they moved forward, two figures from two different worlds walking side by side. Daniel did not know what they would find. He only knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't let Lyra face the darkness alone tonight. The choice he made in that moment would quietly begin the story that would change everything between their worlds. The night settled around Daniel and Lyra as they walked along the dim path leading from the human outpost toward the alien valley. The air was cold but calm, carrying the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hum of machines from the settlement behind them. Lyra stayed close to Daniel's side, clutching the broken communication tablet with both hands as if it was a piece of her mother she didn't want to let go of. Daniel kept his flashlight pointed ahead, watching the path carefully so the girl wouldn't trip on loose stones or uneven ground. Every few steps, he glanced down to make sure she was still beside him. He didn't know how long the search would take, but he knew he had to stay strong for her. Lyra was trying to walk bravely, Yet Daniel could see her anxiety every time the wind made a sharp sound, or the bushes moved as if something passed through them. She was far from her home, and the night felt heavier to someone as young as her. Daniel slowed his pace slightly, allowing her to keep up without rushing. "Lyra," he said softly, "has your mother ever stayed out this late before?" She shook her head slowly. "Never. She always promises she'll be home before the sky turns dark. She says I should never worry because she always keeps her promises." Daniel nodded. "Then we'll find her. She might have gotten stuck somewhere or needed to fix something before she could return." Lyra looked up at him with wide eyes. "Do humans always help others like this?" Daniel paused for a moment before answering. "Not always. But when someone is scared or alone, helping them is the right thing to do." Lyra seemed to think about his words for a few seconds, then nodded as if she understood more than she could express. They continued walking, and soon the path narrowed as the tall rocks appeared in the distance, their silhouettes sharp against the faint moonlight. The gathering path, where Lyra said her mother worked, lay somewhere beyond those formations. Daniel stopped and shined his light across the rocky area. "This way," he said quietly. "We'll check near the tall rocks first." Lyra followed him carefully, her small steps making soft scuffs against the ground. As they got closer, they noticed something lying near the base of one of the rocks. Daniel walked toward it, and Lyra hurried behind him. When he reached the object, he crouched down and picked it up. It was a piece of equipment, a small gathering basket with a broken strap. Lyra recognized it instantly. "That's my mother's," she whispered, her voice trembling again. Daniel inspected the basket. The strap looked torn, but not by force. More like it had been worn out from many years of use. That meant Serena had been here recently. He stood up and looked around the area more carefully. The flashlight caught faint footprints near the dirt, leading away from the rocks and toward the narrow trail ahead. Daniel pointed at them. "Look, Lyra. Your mother walked this way." Lyra's markings glowed slightly in relief. She was here. She really was here. Daniel gently placed the basket in her hands so she could hold on to it for comfort. The girl hugged it close, as if touching it connected her to her mother's presence. Daniel gave her a reassuring smile and motioned for her to follow. They continued walking along the footprints, moving deeper into the path where the land dipped a little. The area became cooler, almost chilly, and the wind sounded softer as it passed through the narrow space. Daniel kept his eyes attentive, scanning for any signs of trouble. Lyra walked steadily, though her steps were slower than before. Every few moments she glanced ahead, as if expecting her mother to appear suddenly from the shadows. After some time, the moonlight grew brighter, helping Daniel see more clearly even without the flashlight. They reached a small clearing where the path widened again. There, lying slightly tilted on its side, was a damaged hovercart. Lyra gasped and ran toward it, but Daniel quickly followed to ensure she didn't get hurt. The cart was clearly Serena's. It had the same smooth curves and soft, glowing symbols Lyra's people used on their tools. Lyra touched the side of the cart gently. "This is hers. She must have used it today." Daniel examined the machinery. The engine panel was open, and small sparks flickered weakly as if someone had tried to repair it but couldn't finish. The control wires were burnt in one corner, and the stabilizer looked cracked. It wasn't the result of an attack. Daniel could tell instantly. It was simply a malfunction, an accident that probably happened during Serena's work. "She didn't leave because she wanted to," Daniel said softly. "She must have tried to fix it but couldn't." Lyra's eyes grew moist again. "Then where did she go? Why didn't she come back?" Daniel wiped dirt from the panel and looked around, thinking. If she couldn't repair it, and the sun was already going down, she might have tried to walk back home on foot. But the path is long, Lyra whispered. "And she walks slowly when she's tired." "That's why we need to keep following the footprints," Daniel said with gentle determination. "She might be close." Seeing the girl shiver slightly, Daniel took out a small warming lamp from his pack. He pressed a button on the top, and the device slowly lit up with a warm, soft glow. Lyra stared at it with surprise, mesmerized by the comforting light. "It will keep your hands warm," Daniel said, handing it to her. She took it carefully, her fingers relaxing as the warmth touched her palms. "Thank you. I didn't know humans made things like this." Daniel smiled a little. "We make many things. Some are useful. Some just make life a little kinder." For the first time since she arrived at his cabin, Lyra smiled faintly. It was small, but it was genuine, and Daniel felt a sense of relief knowing she wasn't completely drowning in fear anymore. That smile, even a tiny one, meant she still had hope. They continued following the footprints, which now led toward a narrow canyon. The trail here was uneven, with stones and shallow dips that made the path harder to walk on. Daniel held Lyra's hand to help her balance as they moved deeper into the canyon. The walls rose high around them, creating a sheltered silence where the wind could barely enter. Lyra's voice came out quietly. "Daniel, do you think my mother is scared?" He thought about his answer carefully. "She might be worried, but I don't think she's scared. She knows you're brave. She knows you'd wait for her, and she knows someone would help her if something happened." "Like you?" Lyra asked. Daniel nodded softly. "Like me." Lyra squeezed his hand gently without saying anything more. They walked deeper until Daniel noticed something ahead. The footprints stopped abruptly near a ridge. He moved closer and shined his flashlight upward. There, wedged between two rocks higher up the slope, was a piece of cloth, the same color as the clothing Serena often wore. Daniel felt his heart tighten. He looked at Lyra, who had already seen it too. Her eyes widened, filled with fear and hope mixed together. Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "She might be up there," he said gently. "Let's go slowly. We'll find her." Lyra nodded, her trust in him unshaken. Daniel guided Lyra carefully toward the ridge, making sure she didn't slip on the loose stones scattered across the ground. The narrow canyon around them was quiet, almost too quiet, as if the night itself was holding its breath. The moonlight filtered through the tall rock walls, creating soft silver glows on the uneven path. Lyra held tightly to Daniel's sleeve with her free hand, the other still holding the warming lamp he gave her earlier. Her small steps echoed faintly, mixed with Daniel's steady footsteps. As they reached the base of the ridge, Daniel paused and scanned the area again with his flashlight. The piece of cloth stuck between the rocks fluttered slightly in the wind, confirming it wasn't a trick of the light. It was real. He recognized the stitching. It matched the pattern on Serena's gathering robe, the one Lyra had described earlier. Daniel's chest tightened, but he kept his voice calm for the girl beside him. "Lyra," he said gently, "we're going to climb a bit. I'll go first to check if it's safe. Stay close and follow my steps." Lyra nodded with a trembling breath, trying to be brave even though her eyes showed fear. Daniel climbed up the first section slowly, testing the rocks with his hands and boots to make sure they were stable. When he found a solid spot, he reached down and offered his hand to Lyra. She hesitated for a moment, then placed her small hand in his and climbed up with surprising determination. Daniel was impressed. Despite her fear, she trusted him completely and did whatever he guided her to do. As they climbed higher, the air grew colder, and the wind made soft whistling sounds between the rocks. At one point, Lyra slipped on a loose stone, but Daniel caught her quickly, steadying her with a firm but gentle hold. Her eyes widened in surprise, and Daniel gave her a reassuring smile. "You're doing great," he said quietly. "We're almost there." She nodded, taking a deep breath, and continued climbing. When they finally reached the spot where the cloth was lodged, Daniel kneeled down and pulled it free. It was torn on one side, as if it had caught on the rocks during a fall. That possibility made his heart pound faster, but he didn't let his expression change. Lyra was watching him closely, and he didn't want to frighten her. Daniel held the cloth out to her. "This belongs to your mother, right?" Lyra took it with both hands, her eyes filling with tears, but she nodded slowly. "Yes. She wore this today." Daniel looked around again, scanning the ridge for any more signs. The flashlight beam moved across the stones until it caught something near the edge, a faint reflection. He moved closer, keeping Lyra behind him, and saw the mark of a slide on the rocks, as if someone had slipped and fallen to a lower part of the canyon. The trail ended at a small slope that led down into a narrow gap between two large boulders. Daniel felt a heavy realization settle inside him. Someone, most likely Serena, had fallen down there. He turned to Lyra. "Stay here for a moment, all right? I'm going to check below." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Is she down there?" Daniel didn't want to make promises he couldn't keep, but he also didn't want to frighten her. "She might be," he said gently. "I'll go see. Just stay where I can see you." Lyra hugged the cloth to her chest and nodded. She stepped back but kept her eyes on Daniel as he carefully climbed down the slope toward the narrow gap. The descent was steep and the rocks were slippery, but he moved slowly and steadily. When he reached the bottom, he shined his flashlight forward. There, leaning against the wall of the canyon, was Serena. She was conscious but exhausted, her leg trapped between two uneven rocks that had pinned her in place. Her breathing was shallow, and her face showed signs of pain, but her eyes were open. She blinked weakly when the light reached her. When she saw Daniel, her expression shifted from fear to sudden surprise. You're human," Serena whispered, her voice tired. Did someone send you?" Daniel shook his head softly. "No. Lyra came to my cabin. She asked for help. We've been searching for you." Serena's eyes widened, and her hand trembled slightly. The idea that her young daughter had walked alone to the human outpost terrified her, but the relief of knowing Lyra was safe washed over her almost immediately. "Lyra," she whispered softly, barely able to raise her voice. "My little one, is she here?" "Yes," Daniel replied calmly. "She's right above us. She's safe." A tear slipped from Serena's eye, but Daniel quickly focused on her leg. He crouched down, examining the way it was stuck. The rocks weren't crushing the bone, but they were tightly wedged and preventing her from moving. A slight shift could free her, but he had to be careful. One wrong move might injure her more. "Serena," Daniel said gently, "I'm going to help you get out, but you need to stay still. It may hurt a little, but I won't do anything too fast." Serena nodded, trusting him despite barely knowing him. Daniel took a small metal tool from his pouch and wedged it between the rocks. Slowly, he pushed and adjusted the stones, using his strength and the leverage of the tool to widen the gap. Serena winced. But she stayed silent and still. Daniel worked carefully, refusing to rush. Finally, after several minutes that felt like hours, the rock shifted just enough for Serena to pull her leg free. She gasped in relief but almost collapsed immediately from the exhaustion of being stuck for so long. Daniel caught her before she could fall and helped her sit comfortably against the canyon wall. "Thank you," she whispered shakily. "I thought I wouldn't see my daughter again." Daniel shook his head gently. "You're safe now. Lyra is close." He looked up toward the ridge. "Lyra," he called softly but loudly enough for her to hear. "It's okay. I found her." Lyra rushed to the edge, her eyes wide with hope. When she saw her mother below, her entire face lit up with overwhelming relief. "Mama!" she cried, her voice breaking. Serena looked up at her daughter, her eyes soft and loving. "Lyra, I'm all right now." Daniel knew they needed to get Serena out of the canyon carefully. He guided Lyra on how to climb down slowly, and once Lyra reached the bottom, she ran straight into her mother's arms, holding her gently but tightly. Serena brushed her daughter's hair with trembling fingers, whispering soothing words. Daniel stayed a step back, not wanting to interrupt the moment. After giving them time to comfort each other, Daniel helped Serena stand. She could put some weight on her injured leg, but not much. He wrapped one of her arms around his shoulders and supported her without hesitation. Lyra held her mother's other hand, walking beside them with careful steps. Together, the three of them began the slow journey back up the slope, moving one steady step at a time. Daniel guided Serena gently, making sure she didn't slip, and Lyra stayed close, determined not to let go of her mother again. When they finally reached the top of the ridge, Serena looked at Daniel with eyes filled with gratitude. "I owe you more than words can say," she murmured. Daniel simply shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. Lyra needed help, and no one should face the night alone." Serena's expression softened, and she understood something important in his tone. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a moment that bridged two different worlds. As they began walking back toward the valley, with Serena leaning on Daniel for support and Lyra walking beside them, the night felt different. The air felt warmer, the stars brighter, and the silence peaceful rather than frightening. None of them knew it yet, but this simple act of kindness would change not only their lives, but the relationship between humans and aliens forever. The journey back from the ridge was slow, careful, and filled with a gentle tension that came from exhaustion mixed with relief. Daniel supported Serena with steady hands, making sure not to rush her injured leg. Lyra walked right beside her mother, never letting go of her hand even for a second. The warming lamp in her other hand glowed softly against the dark walls of the canyon, giving the three of them a warm circle of light as they moved. Serena tried to walk without leaning too heavily on Daniel, but every time she lost her balance or her leg trembled, Daniel tightened his grip without being asked. His steps were strong and patient. Every so often he spoke softly, telling Serena when the ground dipped or when a rock was loose. His voice had a calming effect, something Serena noticed even through the pain. Lyra, seeing Daniel's care, felt safer and more grateful with every step she took. Once they reached the wider part of the path, the air felt less trapped, and the night sky opened above them again. Serena breathed deeply, relieved to be out of the narrow canyon. Daniel paused for a moment, letting her rest. He knelt and adjusted the band of fabric he had tied around her leg earlier to keep it steady. His hands moved carefully, making sure she didn't feel more discomfort than necessary. Lyra sat beside her mother, holding her hand tightly. "Mama," she whispered, "I was so scared. I thought something terrible happened." Serena brushed her daughter's cheek gently. "I'm here now." "Little one, I'm sorry I didn't come home. I didn't mean to frighten you." Lyra's eyes softened, but she still looked fragile. "I walked to the human outpost. I didn't know what to do." Serena looked at Daniel, realizing fully what the girl meant. "And he helped you," she said quietly. Daniel shook his head gently. "She came to me because she trusted me. That was enough." Serena gave him a look filled with deep respect, something she rarely gave to anyone outside her own people. She didn't speak more, but Daniel understood the meaning behind her expression. After a short rest, they continued their journey. The tall rocks slowly faded behind them, and the sound of the wind changed as they reached the open plain that connected the canyon to the alien valley. It was a peaceful stretch of land with soft ground and glowing flowers scattered randomly, giving a gentle light that made the area feel almost magical in the night. When they were halfway across, Serena slowed again. Daniel noticed her breathing becoming heavier. He didn't say anything at first, but when her steps faltered more than once, he spoke softly. "Let me carry you the rest of the way." Serena shook her head. "No, I don't want to trouble you more." "You're not troubling me," Daniel said calmly. "You're injured, and it's getting colder. You shouldn't put weight on your leg." Serena hesitated. She wasn't used to accepting help. Her people lived close to nature and often solved their own problems without depending on others. But this situation was different. She was exhausted, her daughter was fragile from worry, and Daniel's offer came from genuine kindness, not obligation. After a deep breath, she nodded. Daniel gently helped her onto his back, making sure not to shift her injured leg. He lifted her with surprising ease, showing more strength than his quiet appearance suggested. Lyra watched with wide eyes, amazed at how naturally Daniel carried Serena. Once he was steady, Lyra walked beside him, her small hand lightly touching his arm as if making sure he didn't disappear. The walk continued, now faster and smoother. Serena rested her head gently against Daniel's shoulder, grateful for the support. From this close, she could hear the steady rhythm of his breathing and feel the warmth radiating from him. She found it comforting in a way she didn't expect. As they neared the valley, faint glowing lights appeared, symbols carved on the pillars that marked the entrance to the alien community. These lights signaled protection and guidance for travelers. When the first few figures from Serena's people spotted them from afar, they reacted with surprise. It was rare to see a human walking confidently into their valley, especially at night, and even rarer to see one carrying a member of their community so carefully. A small group of aliens rushed toward them, their markings glowing brighter as they approached. They were elders and caretakers who recognized Serena immediately. Their eyes widened in shock and concern when they saw Daniel carrying her. "My child," one elder exclaimed. "What happened to you?" Serena tried to speak, but Daniel lowered her gently to her feet before she answered. She winced slightly from the movement, but stood with help from Lyra. The elders looked from Serena to Daniel with deep curiosity, unsure how to process what they were seeing. Serena spoke with tired breaths. "I slipped near the ridge. I couldn't move my leg. I would still be there if not for him." Lyra stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "He came for me. I knocked on his door, and he didn't ignore me. He searched all night. He didn't leave me alone." The elders' expressions changed instantly. Their markings softened, their eyes grew warm, and their bodies relaxed. They looked at Daniel not with suspicion, but with new respect. More members of the alien community arrived, gathering around in astonished silence. Many of them had never seen a human so closely before, especially one who seemed so gentle and protective. Daniel felt slightly overwhelmed but kept a calm expression for Lyra and Serena. One elder approached Daniel slowly and placed a hand over his heart, a cultural gesture of deep gratitude. Daniel froze for a moment, unsure if he should copy the gesture or respond differently. Serena noticed his confusion and whispered softly, "It means they honor you." Daniel nodded respectfully. "I just did what anyone should do." But the elder shook his head lightly. "No. Humans and our people keep distance. Not because of anger, but because we do not know each other well. Yet you crossed that distance without hesitation. That is not something anyone would do." Lyra moved closer to Daniel, standing proudly beside him. She held her mother's cloth in one hand and the warming lamp in the other, both symbols of fear turned into comfort. Serena looked at her community and spoke again, her voice stronger now. "He helped us as if we were his own family." The crowd murmured softly with admiration. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked at Daniel with newfound curiosity and warmth. For perhaps the first time, humans were not seen as distant outsiders. They were seen as possible friends, protectors, and equals. Daniel didn't know what to say. He didn't think he had done something extraordinary. But standing in that circle of glowing eyes, he felt something shift in the air. Something bigger than the rescue itself. A quiet link was forming between the two worlds, built on trust, born from a single night's choice. Lyra tugged Daniel's sleeve gently. "Don't go yet," she whispered. "Stay with us until morning." Daniel looked at her mother for approval. Serena smiled softly, a peaceful warmth in her expression. "You are welcome to stay. You are part of this night, and this night will be remembered." Daniel agreed, not because he felt obligated, but because he felt strangely at home among them. Something inside him knew that this moment was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of something greater. And as the alien community guided Serena toward the healing chambers, with Daniel and Lyra walking beside her, the valley lights shone brighter than they had in years, as if celebrating the quiet bond forming between two different worlds.